Hey, fellow babies. Welcome back to Pactor Factor on Sifted.net. If you are watching on Sifted, thank you so much for your Patreon patronage. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate your showing up. You can do us a favor. You can link your Twitch Prime account. So when you watch this, then somehow Shane will get paid. The directions are right in the description on the channel, so pretty easy to do. If you're too lame or lazy to be a Patreon patron or to link your Twitch Prime account, and I get it, if you're not a Prime member, you can't do that, then please let's have a follow on YouTube. I'm sorry, follow. Please let's have a follow on Twitter. Shane is at Dinfire, Sifted is at Sifted Games, and I am at Michael Pactor. Let's get to our questions. Our first question this week from Twitter from at RetroGaijin. Some have questioned your prediction that Nintendo will not come close to hitting its 20 million hardware target for Switch this financial year. How do you feel about it now? Strategy Analytics predicted Switch will be the best-selling console in 2019. Do you agree? Nobody should ever question my predictions because I'm never wrong. Okay, write that down. I've never been wrong. Okay, maybe once. Second, I don't give a shit if anybody questions my prediction. You know, make your own prediction. Great. Good luck. Do your thing. I don't care. We haven't gotten the NPD numbers for November, but I can track NPD and I can compare the NPD sell-through numbers over time on all consoles to global sales of the consoles as reported by the publishers. Of the three, Nintendo is by far the best at transparency and giving us numbers. So Nintendo, I think recently, put out the past 20 million Switch units installed base or whatever, and total cumulative. At the end of their first fiscal year, I think it was 17, they put out these numbers. And I am able to then compare the US number, and let's just say the US number is 7 million, and I can go, oh, US is 35% of the total. So I'm able to kind of track it. And I'm able to do this every quarter. So based on my read on Switch unit sell-through through October 31st, they're tracking to 13 million this year. So how do I feel about well below 20? Pretty fucking good, okay? I don't know what the number's gonna be. Will they get a pop because of Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, or will they get a pop because of Smash Brothers? Sure. Is it gonna be 7 million units more? NFW. You can look that up in the Urban Dictionary, okay? NFW, there's no chance. So will it be 2 million, 3 million? Probably. PlayStation's outselling it. Have we gotten a number from Sony? Nope. Let's wait for Sony to give us a number. But Sony, pretty much, if you look at all their announcements, has been selling, 20 million a year. I mean, a year ago, I think they said earlier this year, they were at 80 million. I mean, the thing launched the fall of 13. That means fall of 17, 4 years, and shortly thereafter, January, I think, 80 million. I think they're at 80. 20 million a year. Maybe they'll sell 19. Last I checked, 19 is bigger than 13. So no, Sony's going to outsell them. The truth is, Nintendo sold 15 million consoles its first fiscal year. Remember, the Switch launched like March 3rd, and their fiscal year ends March 31. So they sold a couple million in the month of March of 17, and then the first fiscal year, April 1, 17 to March 31, 18, they sold about 15 million. And if you remember, the Switch was sold out until roughly September 17. Then it was in supply and demand balance, meaning if you wanted one, there was one at the store. You didn't have to wait for it. And so I think we have a pretty healthy, proxy for what sales would be looking at September through March sales, 17 through March of 18. And I'm not seeing a material lift in sales. So, I've got to wait for November and December to know for sure, but we're not seeing a material lift. So when I say it's tracking to 13, the only way I'm wrong is if the mix between the US and all other markets materially shifts to other markets and that the US numbers are misleading. And I don't think that's possible. It's, unless we hear the Switch is suddenly selling 10 million units in China, which we aren't going to be able to track. No, it's not going to be more. So do I agree? No, Sony is dominating. And let's be real. There's no reason to be shamed by selling 13 to 15 million consoles. That's more than the Xbox is going to sell. So the Switch is doing great, and it's $300. So we have a question from YouTube. I love this name, and I apologize in advance if I mess your name up, but I'm going to try. From Nayuan Zuair Abani. Hey, Pac. The recent drop in Activision Blizzard's stock due to the announcement of the Diablo mobile game as opposed to Diablo 4 makes no sense to me. Shouldn't a game that will expand Blizzard's user base cause the stock to rise? Are so-called robo-traders and trading algorithms / artificial intelligence to blame? Are the opinions of hardcore and casual gamers weighted more heavily into the stock's performance? The market is skittish, and we've had something like a 6% drop in the market. If you watch the market on a daily basis, I can't remember seeing volatility like this in 20 years. It's really odd. And I'm talking like down 500-point days and then up 500-point days, and not necessarily back to back. But it's just random. It's like way up one day, way down another day. The market dropped because the market is sensitive to interest rate changes. And we had a big tax bill in the US that cut taxes on wealthy people and corporations, and it triggered the biggest deficits the US has had in its history, and they're not going to get better. Gross domestic product, GDP, is the measure of growth in an economy. And GDP is the sum of consumption plus investment plus government spending. It's that simple. So it's all the stuff you spend money on, goods and services. It's all the money you save, investment, and it's government spending. Now, government spending typically is based on tax revenue. Government takes in $1 trillion in tax, pays out $1 trillion in spending. When the government takes in $800 billion in tax and spends $1 trillion, what happens? There's a $200 million deficit. When you have deficits, $1 billion deficit. When you have a deficit, the government has to borrow money. So the government issues bonds and borrows money. When the government's borrowing money, what that does is it puts pressure on people who like to invest in debt. They have more people who are asking for their money. And so what ends up happening is more debt equals higher interest rates. Higher interest rates means the cost for a business to borrow and run their business goes up. When the cost goes up, that depresses investment. So it's a big vicious circle. But what ends up happening is low taxes and no change to spending means borrowing. Borrowing means high interest rates. High interest rates mean bad for the economy. Stock market goes down. So when the market goes down, every stock doesn't drop by the same amount. If the market drops by 6%, the guys who are up the most tend to drop the most, and that was Activision. They were at an all-time high on October 1st, and then sometime in late October and through November, we started to see how bad the deficit was, and we saw pressure on interest rates. President Trump called out the head of the Fed, his name is Jerome Powell, and said how terrible he is because he's raising interest rates, which is his job. So that's the reason the market dropped. Agreed that Activision had a series of announcements, and those were, and I'll give you all the dates. October 2nd, the Blizzard blog said we're not releasing Diablo 4 at BlizzCon. October 3rd, Mike Morhaime left. November 2nd, BlizzCon unveiled Diablo Immortal, and you had the gamer backlash. So those are three bad facts. And then November 8th, Activision reported earnings. Numbers were fine, but they wouldn't give a date on Diablo Immortal. They don't look like they have a big game coming next year, and they didn't have a giant game this year, but they had World of Warcraft expansion pack. So when you combine all those things, it caused concern. The market's on a downward slope. Activision was at an all-time high on October 1st, and the stock came down really hard. It's not algorithms, and it's not Diablo 4 only, although that's a piece of it. What really happened, and I think this is fascinating on the Activision side, I didn't know this until October 3rd. Apparently 10 of my idiot competitors modeled Diablo 4 coming out next year. And when I say that, the truth is, and I'm sure I've talked about it on this show before, Diablo 4 was never coming next year. And so when I wrote the note after the Blizzard blog came out and said Diablo 4 is not going to be announced at BlizzCon, I found out from an investor that 10 of my competitors had modeled Diablo 4. It's never been in my model, so it's not in my estimates. And I wrote in my note, The Diablo 4 rumor has become a bad internet meme. It's the worst meme in history. And what happened is the guys asking me questions apparently talked to my idiot competitors too. So there's 30 guys covering Activision. They talked to all of those people too. Unfortunately, at least 2/3 of the guys who cover Activision have been covering it for 2 years or less. They couldn't even tell you when Diablo 3 came out. They have no idea. They just know that it's a game. They couldn't tell you when Diablo 2 came out. So they don't realize, by the way, 2000, that that was a 12-year development cycle, 2000 to 2012. They don't know that StarCraft 1 came out in 98 and StarCraft 2 in 2010, 12-year development cycle. Do you see a pattern here? 12 years. And so why would Diablo 4 be coming out in 2017 or 2018 after 5 or 6 years? Dumb, dumb, dumb. But because so many investors asked the question, about 10 of my competitors went, oh shit, these investors think it's coming out. They must be right. I'm a faker. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. I'll just put it in my model because, you know, what the hell, if I put it in my model, that must be right. And the company, Activision, allowed investors to kind of get out of control and believe something that wasn't going to happen. So 10 other firms had it, investors believed it, and so when Diablo 4 was nixed as not coming out soon, investors started to sell Activision. It started its decline. Then Morhaime left. It declined further because people got spooked. Why is he leaving? Is something wrong? And then they got to BlizzCon. And that's when you idiots got involved. And I tweeted a copy of an article saying you're not entitled to a game just because you want it and get over yourselves, and the companies are doing the best they can. I had more comments on that tweet than any tweet I've ever had. It was like literally 370 comments. Unbelievable. But the fact is, the way the BlizzCon audience responded was, we're getting Diablo Mobile, therefore there is no Diablo 4 game coming. Or the team that's making Diablo 4, which is what we came here to hear about, stopped working on it and they went to work on a mobile game, and they're mutually exclusive concepts. And so the mobile game slowed down the delivery of the PC game, which is what we came here to see, and therefore it's not coming out for another few years. Well, grow up. The mobile game is probably literally 10 or 15 people at Blizzard. And those 10 or 15 people are not full-time working on Diablo 4. The guys doing level design on Diablo 4 and building the engine and making sure everything works properly are hard at work on Diablo 4. So it was just a wrong outcome. I will credit you whiny little pricks who complain about everything, that Activision picked the wrong audience. And if you remember back to E3, when Rod Ferguson got on stage and announced Gears Pop, or whatever it was called, the Funko Gears thing, he said it and people were booing, and then he showed a big screenshot from Gears 5, the next Gears. When Bethesda got up and showed Elder Scrolls Blades, and it, which actually people kind of liked, they also teased Elder Scrolls 6. It would have been smarter for Activision to say, look, we heard, Blizzard, excuse me, we heard you loud and clear. Diablo 4 is absolutely in development. It is absolutely on track to come out in the next few years, and we'll let you know as we progress. And here's some cool screenshots. And oh, by the way, to tide you over until that game comes out, here's a mobile game. I think people would have given them a standing ovation. But instead, they allowed people to come away with the perception that the PC version had been delayed. So the answer to your question is, the stock's been going down because it was up so much. They allowed Fortnite to eat their lunch on Overwatch free-to-play and Hearthstone free-to-play. And so they saw their microtransaction revenue go down. They had some missteps. They took forever to get King advertising to ramp. So there's a lot of reasons why the stock has gone down. So no, it's not because of Diablo 4. That is an element that contributed. It's not because of robo-traders and trading algorithms. What really happens is when these stocks go way up, it's because you get a lot of people who don't really know what they're buying. They just buy a momentum, and they like stocks that go up, so they chase them. And when they go down, these are the first people to sell. So that's the answer. Okay, our next question from YouTube from Philip Rohrhuber. Hey, Pac, how on earth is it possible for a masterclass game developer like Bethesda to release a game like Fallout 76, which is getting seriously low scores compared to its previous games? What do you think went wrong? Multiplayer. The reason that Bethesda is a masterclass developer is because they are as good as anybody at making, campaign mode single player games and RPGs, and they're great at it. And as you guys know, among my favorite games ever are, pretty much all their games. I think the analogy is like a movie studio deciding to make a TV series. So somebody who is used to making a 2-hour standalone movie, trying to make a 13 or 20 episode per season TV show with a 7-year story arc. So taking a movie director and having him make Lost or Breaking Bad, that's hard to do. Some guys can do it, and some guys are very good at it, but most require a different skill set. And so Bethesda is particularly good at storytelling, and as I said, a self-contained story. They aren't really sure how to do multiplayer, and I think it's clear they messed up. And making multiplayer is different. The story is different. The campaigns tend to go on forever. There's an expectation on the part of gamers, in multiplayer there's always something to do, and there'll be level progression, and it's just different from single player. So, I think if you want to place blame, perhaps Bethesda should have not homegrown the talent. Perhaps they should have rated, studios that have had successful multiplayer productions. So, perhaps hired people from, the Respawns or the 343 Industries or the, anybody who's made really great multiplayer, and they didn't. So I don't know how to explain it other than it's a skill set. They are good developers. They will definitely learn from this experience, and they will probably go back to the drawing board and figure out what they did wrong. But I'm surprised they released it as bad as it is, and it's not like them. And it's one thing for a studio that consistently gets 90 Metacritic scores to get an 80, and screw up a little bit. It's really odd to see 50s. I mean, 50s are, like that game 50 Cent, I think, got about a 50. It's really hard to make a game that bad, and I haven't played it. So, I was gonna play it. I was psyched about it. I have no interest. I mean, life's too short. My wife has a saying that says she has a towel or something. It says life's too short to drink bad wine. Life's too short to play bad video games. Okay, our last question this week from Patreon from NeoJD. With Sony pulling out of E3 2019, does this mean the PS5 reveal is set for next year? What do you think Sony's strategy is? What changes do you see Microsoft making for its E3 showcase in response? And what can ESA do to save E3? Look, I think Sony withdrawing is a really bad idea. And, I'm not sure what motivated it. I mean, let's be real. They probably spent 20, 30 million bucks on that thing. So it's not an inexpensive, show. So they're saving money on the decision. And maybe they spend 50, maybe they spend 100, I don't really know. But I think they get a tremendous amount of publicity from it, so I think their pulling out was a bad idea. Scaling back is one thing, pulling out's a bad idea. In fairness to them, they probably don't have a lot of new content to announce because they probably are launching a PS5 in 2020. And so they probably don't want to announce new exclusives for PS4 for 2019 and 20 when they're going to have new exclusives for the PS5 in 2020. I get that. And we have a lot of titles that aren't out yet, like Death Stranding, and I mean, I think they may have dated Days Gone, but there's a couple of titles they've been talking about for years that are very much going to be on PS4. So, I think that they probably are running toward the end of their pipeline for PS4 exclusives, and there was no point if they're not going to announce anything. I kind of get that. I still think they should be there. And to be honest with you, and this is not the ESA's fault, but it's not that the ESA has allowed this to happen. It's that the tone of the show has shifted. It started, I think, when EA decided to move off the show floor. Around the same time, Activision decided not to have a booth one year, and they folded themselves into the Sony booth. And then, Microsoft, who just because they bought Nokia, ended up owning the license to the Nokia theater, so they moved at least next door. EA is 4 miles away or 5 miles away in a different place. I think that the ESA, not through its own fault, lost control over the show. I think it's important. The ESA, don't think of it as an entity. Think of it as a partnership of all these guys. And all of these players, Activision, EA, Microsoft, and Sony, should be getting together to make sure that they are working together to assure their mutual success. And I think it's really stupid, each of them, to be off-site. Now, in fairness to EA, they decided to do a part fan show. So at least I get that they needed to be in a separate location to have a fan show. The ESA responded. They opened up E3 to fans. And the first year was a complete mess. And the second year, they limited the fans to after noon or 2 o'clock or something. I think it was 2 o'clock the first day and noon the other 2 days. So at least we could have meetings and not be overwhelmed, by fans. So the ESA is adapting. Mike Gallagher left the ESA a couple months ago. I haven't heard of a replacement, so I don't think they've done one yet. They need to get their act together. They need to get a replacement. They need a person who's prominent in the industry, and they need somebody who can pull all this back together, because I think it hurts the industry by acting like everybody's working against one another, doing their own thing. If you end up not having E3, you end up having a bunch of little individual BlizzCons and nobody cares. And I think that's a massive mistake. So back to, what are we going to see on PlayStation 5? It's coming. And realistically, I think Sony and Microsoft recognize that the world is kind of moving away from physical discs and dedicated consoles and moving toward streaming games or downloading games to some other device, like a PC that can be linked to your TV through Bluetooth, or download to your phone or your tablet or your Echo Show or your Apple TV or your Google HomePod. I mean, there's ways to do it, Google Home. There's ways to do it without forcing a console purchase. So you've seen these rumors of Microsoft Scarlett, and they're going to have a streaming device, and even the Valve Steam Box, and Microsoft, somebody just leaked out they may launch the Scarlett this year. I don't think so. But regardless, I think you're going to have two ways to play games. You're going to have a streaming / download to another device service, and you're going to have dedicated consoles for hardcore gamers. And so I think the next generation will be smaller in terms of hardware and much bigger in terms of players, because they're going to open it up and remove a barrier to entry for people who want to play. And probably what you're going to end up with is, think of watching a movie on TV instead of watching a movie in the theater. You're going to get it at a different price at a different time. That's probably where we're going. And I think Sony recognized this back when they bought Gaikai and OnLive. And I think that they're trying to be in that business with PlayStation now. So, on the one hand, Sony appears that they're not really on top of it. On the other hand, they're the smartest guys in the room. So I'm going to give them credit that they know exactly what they're doing. I just think it's a bad idea, because I think they're passing up an opportunity to have a giant showcase and talk to a lot of people. Thank you for joining us on Pachter Factor on Sifted.net. I'm hopeful you're subscribing on Sifted as a Patreon patron. If you are watching us on YouTube, please do your best to follow the instructions and link your Twitch Prime account so that you can, Twitch Prime will contribute every month to Sifted for the privilege of delivering this brilliant content to you. So please link if you can. And if you aren't a Prime member, you can't afford Patreon, and you just want to watch the pack, that's great. Please follow us all on Twitter. At Dinfire is Shane. At Sifted Games is Sifted. At Michael Pachter is me. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. I get all these like rando, Twitter direct messages from people with the profile picture of some, porn star saying hi. So those, I don't want those, because if I respond to those, I think there'll be a record, and that wouldn't be cool. I'm married and I love my wife. So if you are a hot porn star, please don't DM me. I do not need that in my life. I really just want legitimate gaming questions.